So I welcome all back to the 16th National Convention of the United Nations Global Compact Network India. This national convention provides a platform to discuss, explore, and highlight the solutions to pressing issues with respect to the SDGs. Talking of the problems alone won't cut ice. We need to focus on the imperatives, which is the focus of this very important plenary session. It centers on C-suite imperatives to assess, act, and accelerate the SDGs. We have a very eminent and distinguished panel of business leaders with us to take this forward. I welcome Ms. Anandati Bhattacharya, Chairperson and CEO, Salesforce, India. We also have Mahendra Singhi, MD and CEO, Dalmia Cement, Kulmeet Bawa, President and Managing Director, SAP Indian Continent, Mr. Shiva Subramanian Raman, CMD SIDBI. I also welcome Ms. Vartika Shukla, CMD EIL. This session is being moderated by Mr. Vishwesh Prabhakar, MD Growth and Strategy Sustainability at Accenture. Over to you, Mr. Prabhakar.
Thank you so much, Richa. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen in the audience, and a very good evening to all my esteemed panelists. Really, it's my privilege to be moderating this panel discussion with such an august set of leaders representing the key enablers of accelerating SDGs. We have leaders from technology companies, from the financial sector, from engineering, R&D, and project management sector, and from hard-to-abate industry. More than ever before, there is consensus on addressing climate change imperatives and pivoting to sustainable business models, which not only create value, but also are good for the planet and people. One of the most fundamental questions, and that question is creating a profound shift for businesses, is to transition from short-term orientation, which shareholders demand, versus long-term orientation, which is the key imperative of stakeholders while meeting or exceeding expectations of both. With this background, my first question to my esteemed panelists is, how is your organization embracing SDGs and climate change priorities and change in mindset from shareholder capitalism to stakeholder capitalism? So I'll take this opportunity to first request Ms. Bhattacharya to share her perspectives as she represents a global technology company. Ms. Bhattacharya, over to you.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody, and thank you very much for having me here. I think, the company that I currently head in India, Salesforce, it was set up by Mr. Mark Benioff with a very clear understanding that he believed that business is a platform for change. And our purpose is very strongly aligned with the SDG goals. And we are committed to leveraging our data and technology to help change makers meet the 2030 agenda. Now, Salesforce and our commitment for being a force for the good is actually quite unparalleled. We have created a whole set of companies who have taken the pledge 1%. And this is based on our company 1 by 1 by 1 model, whereby we donate 1% of our equity or profits, 1% of our products, and 1% of our employees' time in actually doing a volunteer service so as to ensure, that we are giving back to the community much more than we are taking out from it. And why I mention this specifically is because I remember in my earlier institution, where we used to always, we had been donating 1% of the profits there for a very long time. But whenever I used to go with a check to any of these organizations, I used to also apologize that I couldn't give them the time that they deserved. And I believe, time is really the most important ingredient over here that is required to be given. In Salesforce, however, we are actually monitored on the amount of on the number of hours that we spend for doing a voluntary work. We get 7 days paid holiday in order to do this voluntary work. But this is a target that is monitored just as much as any of your other commercial targets maybe. So to that end, we have created this Pledge 1% Club. We are the founding member there. And there are a lot of companies that have done the same, thereby generating hundreds and millions of dollars for good causes. And of course, as a company, we continue to do this. We understand that there are critical challenges like climate change, poverty, conflict, inequality. It requires businesses, governments, and the social sector to innovate together. And our innovation focused culture also means that the company rolls up its sleeves and invents solutions themselves when needed, such as, the vaccine cloud during the pandemic, the work.com that allowed you to actually cater to the well-being of your workforce that was returning to work, as well as the sustainability cloud. So at Salesforce, what we strive for is not only responsible trailblazing, but we actually look at a way in which we do these things in order to help every stakeholder accelerate their progress towards ensuring that the SDG goals are met by them. So to that end, I think, this is a company that believes very, very strongly that as corporate leaders, we should be held not only accountable for meeting our commitments in areas of work, but also commitments made in areas of governance, sustainability, equity, trust, employee programs, and giving back.
Well, thank you so much. The key takeaways are, the responsible trailblazer term and the 1% commitment, more specifically in terms of time. So that is very difficult, and you are measuring and tracking it is really very, very inspiring. Now I go to Ms. Shukla. She actually represents leadership from an R&D, engineering, and project management perspective. And I'll ask your perspectives on this matter, ma'am.
Am I audible, Vishwesh?
Yes, you are.
All right. So I think the relevance of embracing SDGs and onboarding climate change for an organization, especially for an organization like Engineers India, who's looking into technology, who's looking into adoption of technologies towards the quest for reaching this goal, is very, very relevant. And why I say this is that it is not just the need from the commitments that as a nation we have made, or as a globe we have to look at. It is also for a company or a corporate to transform in current times to be relevant for tomorrow and bring to the platform to our clients, specifically being in the consultancy sector, solutions and possible options for them to adopt for their own business sustainability as well as growth. Now, the world today, as we all know, is transforming very, very rapidly, and every stakeholder is relevant and important. The shifting of priorities from all the industries, from what used to be a short-term profit maximization, is aligned more and more visibly slow in terms of the branding, in terms of the business reprocessing, in terms of positioning of a corporate in this activity. Looking at EIL and looking at us as a public sector organizations, our policies are completely aligned with the agenda of the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. In terms of the offerings that we do for our clients, we have huge, end-to-end solutions looking at energy efficiency of the current assets, whether it is refineries or petrochemicals, and looking at the low-hanging fruit and long-term interventions, which need a lot of gestation and sometimes financial interventions to actually onboard for any company to invest and go forward. These are the kind of an diversified yet integrated approach in our solutions that we are bringing in terms of mitigation of climate change. Further, I would say that the potential is huge and opportunities are plenty. And it is for the vision at leadership level, how to push this agenda, because change from the conventional sector that we were in terms of oil and gas, moving forward to renewables and looking at those options is something of a change of a mindset. So it is not just the quantitative, quantifiable aspects of change to manage this, but it is also the intangible benefits and the benefits as a whole. And linked with this is, of course, the policy as a corporate to look at the humanity, look at a nation as a whole, and dovetail the technical and commercial aspects also with improving lives of the people and the communities that we work with. So that is in short like a kind of change, both in terms of technology, in terms of ability to bring in competency to engineer those technologies and bring them at ground level, to scale up R&D offerings, innovations, bring them to the ground level, bring them to the market, as well as work hand in hand together with our clients and within our own organizations towards nurturing the intangible aspect of bringing in a change management.
Thank you, Ms. Shukla. I think many of the technologies we require to move to net zero and really transform the societal challenges are yet to be discovered, and great to hear that EIL is taking the lead in proactively investing in those technologies and incentivizing customers and stakeholders to adopt that. I now move to Mr. Singhi. You represent a very difficult industry in the context of today in which we operate. Building materials are essential. They're not going to go away anytime soon, but you consume a lot of energy per ton of cement consumed. I want to really request you to share how the pivot in mindset happened at your organization and what inspired you to pivot and embrace SDGs.
Thanks, Vishwas, for the great opportunity and to be part of such esteemed panelists. First, I would say that the philosophy and ethos of our organization quietly matched with SDGs. And that's why we could, embrace SDGs in 2015 itself. That because that is part of the inclusive growth which we always had talked. And that inclusive growth means for us that let us look at stakeholders capitalism, not only shareholders capitalism. And I would say if we identify many 17 SDGs, I would say we have been otherwise also working on 13 SDGs. And those 13 SDGs, we were mainly in the group of, say, taking care of national resource management, circular economy, people and communities, and then energy efficiency and use of clean energy. So now this also matched very well with our business philosophy of clean and green is profitable and sustainable. This philosophy and SDGs met very well, and accordingly we started working on it, and then we could find that we could get big benefits, big fruits out of it. And at a certain point of time, with these SDGs implementation, we could become one of the lowest carbon footprint cement company, one of the biggest producer of low carbon cement in the country. We could become water positive 5 times by 2018. As well, we could also have greater harmony in our society. So based on that, I think the involvement of our people have gone up in a big way. Now, I would say that based on SDGs implementation, which is being measured by us in all the manners, it has created pride in all our stakeholders. And first pride is in our employees, our people, and second is in the board, and third maybe investors and few others also. This has also helped us to think beyond that. And I would say, though you have said, which is being said by others also, that cement is a hard to abate sector, difficult to abate, but the commitment which we have shown, and now it is being shown by various other cement companies, it's now possible to abate sector. And based on that, in 2018, we came out with a commitment of making our cement net zero and negative by 2040. And also, becoming water positive 20 times by 2025. So there are made various such initiatives which has helped us in our better profitability also and better climate management also. So now with full confidence, we can say that our cement, our company would be taking care not of today's environment and today's economy, but of tomorrow also. And that's why we are able to commit that in time to come, the youngsters, the young generation can depend on not only our cement, but many other cement companies also. And in fact, Mr. Vishwesh, in 2015, we came out with a roadmap to implement SDGs along with the help of World Business Council for Sustainable Development with few more cement companies. And now those actions are in the process, and now we are in the process of accelerating it. I would say SDGs gives us a right roadmap, and of course we all have to try that we achieve that in our own way before 2030. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Singhi. I really like the ethos and principle that clean and green is profitable and sustainable. That's a great trigger point. And as you've embarked on this journey, I think the aspect that your employees feel very proud, and essentially it has become a magnet for attracting talent, is what you shared, which actually is very relevant. I now move to Kulmeet. Kulmeet, you actually represent another global technology company, which also works very closely with the industrial manufacturing, amongst other sectors. What are your perspectives, in terms of embracing, the shift from shareholder capitalism to stakeholder capitalism?
Thank you, Vishwesh, and some wonderful views there coming in from all of you. Thank you for that. And look, at the outset, my compliments to the UNGC for all the good work being done, right? Because it's always so phenomenal or wonderful to work on matters that are larger than life, that impact the greater good. From an SAP perspective, Vishwesh, look, our mission of helping the world run better and improving people's lives aligns very well with what the SDGs are trying to accomplish. And I think very similar to what Mahindra Singhi said a short while ago, right? So I think there's a synchronicity there. And in fact, the way we've gone about it at SAP is that we've embedded the SDG objectives in our way of working, right? And in two manners. One is as an exemplar, wherein we walk the talk, we showcase how it's done. And second is as an enabler for all our stakeholders or stakeholder management that, to your question. And, from an exemplar perspective, we've committed to going carbon neutral by 2023, right, which is 2 years away. So initially the date was 2025, and we've advanced it by a couple of years. We've also made it to the A list of the CDP. I remember a tweet about a week ago. Very, very proud of it. And once again, our number one in the software industry on the Dow Jones Sustainability Index. So all of that is from an exemplar or if I could say, walking the talk perspective. Now, when we look at it from an enabler perspective, given that 75%, at least 75% of the world's transactions today touch an SAP system, right? We truly understand the responsibility or the onus or the contribution that we can make to bring about a change in the way our stakeholders operate, to your question, Vishwesh. And I'll just telescope it down to India. So if you look at India today, our customers here in the country contribute to more than 60% of the total GDP, right? Which is massive. But at the same time, I guess the same set also contributes to more than 1/3 of India's greenhouse gas emissions. Right. And so clearly, as SAP, I think we can make a material difference here. And we're doing this by building solutions that can help measure the environmental impact in business processes, which can then pave the path or the way to build a circular or a near zero emission processes. Similarly, if you look at the community as a stakeholder, right, I think for decades now, we've been trying to create a positive impact on young lives by providing digital education for the underprivileged and loads and loads of activities there from a community standpoint. Similarly, from a stakeholder, when you look at the government, and governments are very large stakeholders as far as we are concerned, Vishwesh, right? So we forged very deep partnerships with ministries all across, with state governments, the Niti Aayog, and we're working on various SDGs with various governments and with various ministries. So to summarize, and a lot of it has already been said before me, but in short, we have adopted a very comprehensive approach at SAP to work with our stakeholders so that together we can create what I would say is the right impact as far as the world is concerned.
No, thank you, Kulbeet. The phrase on exemplars and enablers. So you're changing yourself. You've been very aggressively preponing the net zero target, and the very fact that you are so pervasive in your interconnections with organizations, including governments worldwide. You as an organization have insights and a responsibility to facilitate that journey, and you are actually pivoting to new products and services for carbon footprint management and circularity. That's great to hear. Mr. Raman, finance has come out as a key enabler. We actually did research. About 10 years ago, the CEOs used to highlight the role of the financial sector as number 8 lever in terms of driving SDGs. Recently, the investor community is really amongst the top 3. From your perspective at your organization, how you have actually pivoted from a shareholder mindset to a stakeholder mindset? Please share your perspectives. Mr. Raman, you're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, good evening, and it's great to be here amongst such erudite panelists. I think, the way I looked at it, SIDBI is probably square in the middle of the entire set of SDGs. I think the entire concept of creating a small industries development bank, it's a DFI meant for the MSMEs, and we really do 2 things. One is finance MSMEs. We also do a huge refinancing of portfolios of other lenders on the MSME front. And we also work towards creating the ecosystem for the MSMEs in India. So there's a lot of partnerships that we have with the remaining players in the financial sector, as well as across the states and with multiple NGOs and other such people. So, I just, try to work it out for myself whether, any of the 17 SDGs, are not connected to SIDBI, and I, happily failed in doing that. So, it's really about everything that we are doing is catering towards one of the goals of the SDG. And I think SIDBI started this journey way back in, probably 2008 and 9, when we embarked upon risk-sharing fund along with the World Bank, and that really went towards creating energy efficiency. I think energy efficiency was one of those early buzzwords, and it along the way created a lot of energy savings, and across multiple institutions, municipal corporations, street lighting, etc. So it's one of those successful funds which I think we are really happy about, the fact that we were early in this particular venture across the country. But what SIDBI really does is works very closely with the small and micro and nano entities, and that's really where I would say we have been very lucky to be seeing the fruits of success. So whether it be working closely with the microfinance sector, which brought a lot of succor and relief to so many units, basically small packets of finance delivered in places where the large banks could not reach. That's been one of the sort of greatest successes that SIDBI has seen. So also along the way, somewhere SIDBI became one of the 2 institutions which got accredited to the Green Climate Fund. So SIDBI and NABARD, are sort of in that space. And honestly, I believe that there's a lot more that SIDBI has to do in terms of, you know, carrying forward the financing of green initiatives, as well as get involved entirely in the whole concept of greening finance. So, you know, how does finance therefore bring about those changes such that, you know, the regulations around finance itself cause a much greater focus towards the SDG goals. So I'll stop at that for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Raman. Your pioneering role in terms of creating a fund focusing on energy efficiency, greening of finance, and in fact, a social dimension where you as an organization has played a very critical role in terms of funding, you know, small and mid-sized business, which are essentially the engine of growth. So that's very critical. Now, I think where we stand today as a planet and as an ecosystem, very clearly, I think we are having this conversation, this level of awareness and commitment in the 11th hour. So we have less than 2,000 days to meet our targets. When we actually conducted the global CEO interviews, what came out very clearly is that there are four key enablers. Carbon pricing and policy enablement is a key enabler to help us move much more faster than our ambitions. Setting ESG standards, capital and technology, and innovation. Now, I'll start off with Mr. Singhi. Mr. Singhi, given the paucity of time and the enormity of the target, businesses have a very unique role to play, given the fact that they are more process-centric, they can access capital, and they have the organization to really set the pace and do some pilots and then scale them up quickly. Now, what are those policy changes or policy enablers which are really required to accelerate this journey so that we actually start moving in a very, very different gear going forward?
Great question, Mrs. First, I would say that each organization will have to have their own strategy that how to meet SDG goals, and at the same time, how to work towards net zero carbon economy. Now, based on that, now what state government or what the central government or what the global organizations can do is to support clean tech projects in a big way. Because in India or otherwise also, you would find that there are umpteen number of technologies, umpteen number of projects which are available, which can bring down CO2 emissions, which can bring up employment, which can conserve water or natural resources. But major roadblock is the finance. And of course, Mr. S. Raman and others, they are supporting it. But if you look at the discussions which we had in COP26 in Glasgow, the various negotiations which happened on climate finance, still finance is a big challenge. Though developed world had promised $100 billion by 2020, now they are talking of 2023. But leave apart, there's a $30 trillion finance group which has been formed in Glasgow, which now is committing that we would be supporting the companies who are having the right ESG policies, the companies who have the clean tech projects, companies working on energy transition. So one of the important factor would be whether it's through the central government, whether it's through UNFCCC or any other organization, finance should come forward. Second one would be how to support clean energy. Now in clean energy, you have to support for renewable energy like solar and renewable. And second, the new buzzword as well as the new technology which is being talked about is about hydrogen. Now, hydrogen can surely replace the fossil fuel in a big way. And the good part is that Indian government has come out with National Hydrogen Commission, but then the hydrogen technology and clean energy technology have to be supported. Third one would be few important technology without which cement sector, steel sector, power sector cannot be decarbonized. That has to be supported in a big way, and for that, some innovation fund would be required. And one, in a short way, I can talk is about carbon capture and utilization. This is one technology which we are pushing, and SC Development Bank is supporting. So this would definitely help various sectors to bring down their CO2 emission, as well can also support other industries who are using otherwise the carbon lead material, and this technology can give green carbon, green CO2. So these are the few technologies which have to be supported in a big way. And lastly, maybe the India has huge quantum of wasteland, maybe more than 80 million hectares land, in which they have committed 26 billion. Now, how the SIDBI and many other organizations can support organizations to do the sustainable plantation, which can be used, one for replacement of fossil fuel and few others also, so that it creates rural employment and we are able to fulfill our SDGs. So in a short way, I would like to share this.
So thank you. I think you've summarized it very well. The way I understood it is really it's in two parts. One is essentially the nature-based solutions and the renewable technologies of today. They need to be scaled up very, very quickly. And funding and support and enabling ecosystem is required. And then there are technologies of tomorrow, and you talked about two, hydrogen and carbon capture and utilization and storage. They essentially require stakeholder coalition in terms of giving the finance so that the innovating entities can really kind of focus on the innovation and quickly do the pilots and do the scale up, because they will matter increasingly as we actually solve for the first. Now, this is an important segue for me to go back to Ms. Shukla. Given that you actually represent, technology, engineering, and R&D, what is your perspective on, the role of innovation, especially in areas like hydrogen, carbon capture, utilization, and storage? And could you share some perspectives from the perspective of EIS?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think that question and Mr. Singh's consolidated in addressing this in a consolidated manner is quite represents the need of the hour in terms of moving forward. As he's rightly mentioned, these technologies are requiring interventions in policies, interventions in allocation of funds, whether it is an innovation fund or an allocation in some kind of a central funding or a state-driven, support to any investor in these areas. These are, they have a cost curve. All these technologies have, in fact, two primary challenges. One is the scalability. So if you kind of scale it to a reasonable level, like the developed or the commercialized industry is, the cost in terms of the plant and machinery is going to come down. So you'll have, diversification of vendors, you will have more standards, more, realization of revenue in terms of scale. The challenge on that is that several of these green technologies are required to be distributed by the way our land is, the way our agricultural, distribution of utilization is, the distribution and the availability of biomass. So looking at that, you need kind of a smaller, sustainable, distributed approach. So that approach may not bring the scale of projects which bring the economy. That's one part of it. The second part of it, these are transitioning, changes in terms of green hydrogen, in terms of the biofuel area, in terms of valorization of biomass for many other utilized, substitution of petroleum products in terms of ethanol or any other liquid products, in terms of carbon capture and utilization. These are all doable, but they are in a state of rapid R&D to commercialization. So two things which are very relevant is a mechanism of regulation and policy intervention, and National Biofuel Policy of 2018 actually showcases that step forward at ground level bringing projects to shape that they are being implemented. And we are implementing one of such refineries in Assam, which is a bamboo-based refinery for production of second generation bioethanol. So, but the pace, the satisfaction that corporates have and us as engineering companies have is that the pace is very fast. And if we see even the green hydrogen mission, the commitments from our oil sectors, the commitments of the stakeholders, both at the ministry level as well as the outside the ministry in terms of service providers and technology providers, is huge. We are also engaged in several of our clients to look at these options, how to bring them at commercial level. So it's a transition which is very happening at a very fast pace, which is much recognized in terms of policy support, in terms of financial handholding. And the sooner that these studies are brought to the fore, let me give another example of a very successful program of valorizing of biomass to compressed biogas, which is the Satat program, which is huge. Out of the 5,000 plants which have been declared, almost 3,000, 2,900 letter of intents have been issued to various distributed small private players to put it up with an assurance of the oil marketing companies to pick it at a declared price. So what does an investor who's looking at these sustainable technologies look for? It looks for a sustained market, a market which is there in place, which has been created, and a price which is determined such that there would be a reasonable return to the private investor. I think once these things which have happened in so very recent past, in the last 3-4 years, are actually path breaking, and these will open the window, as you mentioned, and I'm coming to that point. It is opening a window to give room for faster pace of innovation. And many of the organizations are not doing it on their own. They are looking at complementary skills from other organizations so that they can leapfrog from where they are to another pace, such that these things are available. And I'll quote our own example of our own company. While we are implementing this biorefinery, we have recently signed an understanding and a strategic alliance with a Finnish company to actually bring that technology to the nation. So we've leapfrogged right away from an R&D company, from our partner, to us being the engineering partner and bringing it to the nation. So these kind of changes are very rapid. These are actually priorities for us now as an organization. The core, leveraging our core competencies to these areas holds the key to success and staying relevant in times of tomorrow. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Shukla, for sharing your perspectives on that. Digital technologies, in addition to engineering technologies, will really be very important as we actually scale the sustainability ambitions. Ms. Bhattacharya, over to you. You actually are at the front and center of it, in terms of digital and a technology company, and engaging in the digital transformation of businesses who are scaling up their green agenda. What are your perspectives in the role of digital technologies in accelerating our SDG ambitions?
So one thing first that I'd like to say, that Salesforce as a company, we believe in walking the talk, both in our offerings as well as in our own operations. So we are not waiting until 2030 or 2040. We have accelerated our investments to ensure that we leave no footprint as of today. And we include scope 1, 2, and 3. So we have reached 100% renewable energy for our operations this year. We've been working on this for almost a decade by investing in wind farms and solar projects all around the world. Besides that, if you look at our offerings, our product, which is called the Net Zero Cloud, it is designed to help companies track and reduce their own carbon footprints. With the Net Zero Cloud, Salesforce was able to reduce its carbon accounting process from more than 6 months to just 6 weeks, helping wrinkle out the company's push to net zero emissions. The companies that use our net zero cloud to turn net zero commitments into action and to get to the net zero factor, they have seen the benefit of this as a result of it. Also, as a cloud pioneer and a sustainability leader, Salesforce has been committed to accelerating the transition to clean and renewable sources of electricity since 2013. Our work won't stop now, and even though we have reached 100% renewable energy, this means that we will continue to purchase renewable energy equivalent to the amount of electricity we use to power our global operations on an annual basis. By voluntarily purchasing renewable energy, businesses have the opportunity to influence a just energy transition. Through Salesforce's renewable energy purchases, we have learned that projects can have enormously different impacts, such as supporting a local community or protecting the habitat for plants and animals, exactly what Mrs. Shukla and Mr. Singh has been talking about, supporting and creating a sustainable market for this renewable energy so as to encourage these smaller outfits, the smaller participants, to also look at this as a viable source of income and thereby, go away from the polluting energy into the renewable energy.
No, thank you, Ms. Bhattacharya. Kulbeet, you also represent, the digital transformation journey, and huge investments are happening in fourth industrial revolution, and there is a clear overlap between that and sustainable ambitions. Your perspectives on this?
Yeah, Vishwesh, and a lot of what Arundhati mentioned is also applicable to what we are doing. But I'd just like to start by saying that look, tech and innovation are very, very clearly prime enablers for most of the SDGs, right? Whether we look at health and well-being or quality education or climate change. But just taking this example of sustainability, climate change forward, while technology can support in multiple ways, right? I think the first step always is measurement. Because for us to improve on something, we first need to be able to measure it. And otherwise you can't really improve on it. And I think this is where SAP started off by putting together a host or a plethora of solutions to help organizations measure the environmental impact of their end-to-end processes. And when I say processes, it could be the procure to pay or design to operate or hire to retire, any of those processes. And I'll amplify, right? So we can help today capture, and you alluded to it, Vishwesh, with some of the names, the carbon footprint analytics, etc. But today we can actually help capture the carbon emission data and embed the same into business processes, thereby ensuring sustainable practices around the investment management, supply chain, travel, etc., right? So we can set a target, we can help companies set a target for emission reduction and then monitor the progress against that particular goal or target that they've set. Now, add to this the ability that we are providing customers to create various simulations, right? Example, what would emissions look like if you were to change your supply source or change the transportation mode in itself? Okay, what would net zero, or what would the net profit for you look like if the government imposes a carbon tax? So how would you price your new products in order to retain margins or to get? So a lot of simulations are going into the technologies that we are delivering. And very quickly, another big piece before I hand over back to Vishwesh is the innovation piece. And I think there's a very critical need now to get a lot more innovation into this space. And I think Mahendra Singh ji, he mentioned about, I think it was the carbon capture technologies, right? So I think it's super important to actually propagate, help, not just within enterprises like us at SAP or Salesforce, but even through the vibrant startup ecosystem that we see mushrooming today, right? So it's amazing. It's good to bring in a lot more innovation. And before I hand over, there's this very cool startup within SAP. So we incubate, we fund a lot of entrepreneurship within the organization also, in addition to what we do with cohorts outside. But there's this one brilliant startup called Green Token. And, as we know today, and I'm guessing in this audience, we have a lot of Gen Zs and, the younger generation that Mahindra was talking about. And more, both businesses and consumers today are wanting to know if raw materials that are used in the products are sustainably sourced. Are they child labor free? Are they ethically traded? And Green Token, this startup gives you the transparency all the way to the origin, a supply chain visibility that consumers are starting to love. So look, I'll end here, given the time. I could go on, but I think this is super critical, and not just in climate and sustainability, but across anything, any of the SDGs that you look at. I think it plays a very important part. We're trying to do our best, and I'll end with this cliched line, right? We've been helping for 5 decades businesses measure their top lines and bottom lines, but I think today we've reached a point where we've added green line measurement to what we are goaling ourselves on, including what we are giving to our customers.
That's a great takeaway, the green line measurement. And this measurement is very important from the perspective of Mr. Raman, because essentially, if you're going to really assess a business on its ESG scores, you don't want the data to come from the business in Excel sheets. What you want is data is essentially traceable, it is transparent, and there is veracity in the data, which only can come from systems like SAP and Salesforce, which Ms. Bhattacharya and Kulmeet talked about. Your perspectives in terms of, and my question is in 2 parts, is really as you are kind of sieving out the ESG performance of companies as a financer, what are you seeing? And what actions do we need to take to really scale up the funding as companies try to up their ESG or SDG quotient? You're on mute, Mr. Raman.
Yeah, that's really an important question as we go forward, because I think, if you just recall, sometime in the past, there was a great paper that SEBI had brought out on the social stock exchange. Now, we really need to look at so many such, institutions that encourage companies to start achieving those SDG goals. And, whether it's SDG, ESG, these are parameters that need to be brought in within the structures that exist in financing institutions, and thereby give them due weight in the final decision of, the underwriting decision of whether to go or no go. And I think this is really going to take an enormous amount of time. I mean, we're talking about a country which is, certainly not yet middle income, and we're talking about, millions of people who are, struggling to sort of make ends meet. So I really honestly feel that there's got to be a tremendous balance between, how the larger companies are going ahead, and certainly the financing of larger companies should bring in a lot of the concepts of SDGs into it. But we're really talking about so many other companies which are just, starting off. And I think what SIDBI is really looking at is how to carry forward the ecosystem. And I'm just going back to the whole concept of digitization. I think it's an enormous growth path for the financial sector itself. And when we're talking about, the financial sector moving green and completely going digital, then we're talking about some kind of a cascading effect also going on to the companies. So, just look at the way our financial system has now moved from, paper-based KYC to, documentation by, financing institutions. And today we're sitting on a situation where we can actually do the entire credit journey without paper. The journey is truly, sort of from the Aadhaar database and the, outputs of Aadhaar down to digital signatures which are happening from the Aadhaar database, to the ability to get state governments to agree to make stamping completely digital and paperless. So today we're sitting on a situation where 20 state governments have given permission for digital stamping to be done. So, I'm just looking at the whole perspective from the larger financial institutions where something like 6 crore loans are given out on an annual basis. And for 6 crore loans to go completely digital and green, it's an enormous impact that we're seeing in the country. So, I honestly feel that, there's a huge variety in the country, as we all know, and we need to plug in solutions as applicable to each strata. So we really need to bring in the SDG goals as you were talking about, to vet the proposals from larger companies and handhold a lot of small entities. In fact, I'll just give you an example of how we're trying to get the entire microfinance industry, which gives loans essentially to backward classes and women, and trying to get them to realize the benefits of making their processes entirely digital. So it's a long journey, and I think SIDBI is sort of getting stuck into that very, very green spot. And really, what Kulmeet was saying, the green line, I think is a great way to sort of assess the way all of us are doing our work and how we carry it forward.
Well, thank you, Mr. Raman. In fact, there's also a social dimension which I take away, in addition to the role of digital to ensure, paperless trails and increase the confidence of investors like you. Very clearly, I'll go back to Ms. Bhattacharya. You made a comment about the role which organizations can play, not only in terms of driving the SDG ambition and facilitating their clients, but in terms of even upping it. And as you are upping it, and you gave the example of procurement of green energy, it actually drives, what we call just transitions, or it enables the micro entrepreneurs to get livelihoods. And actually, it kicks off a virtuous cycle. Which come to my final question now. You are really at the front and center of managing the pivot from shareholder capitalism to stakeholder capitalism. I'm sure each one of you has actually undergone a lot of introspection in terms of balancing this act while continuing to report quarterly profits, revenues, shareholder returns. I'll actually end by asking one question to each one of you. And I'll actually quote Gandhiji, who said, be the change you want to see. So could you share with the audience one example of an initiative you have started taking on SDGs in your personal lives as you are actually transforming your own organizations, sitting at the helm of leadership and your clients? And I'll start with Ms. Bhattacharya.
Thank you. But, on the personal front, for instance, at the behest of one of my cousins, who's a real climate warrior, she told me that, do you realize that every single toothbrush that you have used till now still exists on Earth? So that has got me started on using bamboo toothbrushes. Okay. This is the pen that I use. Okay. It's a cardboard pen. It's called Inclusa. This is the kind of stuff that I have started using. So cardboard pens, cardboard pencils. This is made from waste paper and bamboo toothbrushes. So to the extent possible in my own personal life, I have tried to incorporate these small things. They are small things, but I think every little bit is going to help. So, that would be my answer right now.
No, thank you. Very inspiring. In fact, that's how the circular economy can really scale up and the pressure on our resources will reduce. Kulmeet, over to you in terms of one small change you've implemented in your own life. I know you have an army background, but really want to share one change as you kind of transform your own business and your clients' business.
Yeah, no, Vishwesh, absolutely. It's so difficult to prioritize one SDG over the other. I think there's so much to do for each of us, both as as individuals as well as organizations. But I think for me personally, very close to my heart, it's always been about how do you reduce inequality, especially when it comes to the gender piece, right? And this is and I just think that I'm privileged both to be in a position to to be able to make an impact personally, as well as, like you mentioned, from an organizational capacity. So dozens of initiatives that I've been involved in personally to educate the girl child. Presently, I'm part of something called the G100 in its own way, which is trying to, build advocacy for gender equal future for the women. And I just think, there's nothing more satisfying than making a real difference and, bringing smiles on the faces of people around you and the underprivileged. Again, I can give you lots of examples, but I'll just pause there. I know we're running out of time. Vishwesh.
Oh, thank you so much, Kulmeet. Very inspiring. Ms. Shukla, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. I think in our family, the change which has actually happened, it is a result out of the pandemic as well. There is no use of any plastic bags anymore in our house because we use only cloth bags and we had to wash them during the pandemic. That habit has sunk in. So any and everything which comes in, it goes back into the driver's car and they are collected there and reused, washed and reused. I think that's one change which has actually set in, and it is reduced a lot in terms of our addiction to these bags. It was an addiction. I think it's an addiction to many of us for years, and this is a conscious and a committed call that we have taken as a family, that we would switch to these bags for thereafter, ever after, if I may say. Thank you.
Thank you. So difficult to do, and it can have such a profound impact if we do it at a family level. Mr. Raman, over to you for the one change you want to share with us and the audience.
No, in fact, I think I had gone on a personal visit to one of these forests in South India, and I think what I really got back from there is the way that the community is so divorced from their forests. It's really sad to find that we know them as tribals and Adivasis, but they're so forced away from what is known as their habitat. And I actually managed to, impress upon the forest guards and took it up at a very, very high level to just ensure that we bring these people back into their own habitat. So, we've now started, of course, with SIDBI. I've managed to push through a much larger program where we have brought the young men who are otherwise just idling their time and doing nothing to start becoming anti-poachers. So it's called anti-poaching wardens. So, APWs across that huge, forest spread in Mudumalai and Satyamangala, that whole area. So, there's a lot that and this all happened, of course, in the middle of the pandemic when we, managed to get a break and, drove down into those parts. So I think there's a lot that all of us can do in terms of, bringing our own personal sort of, ethics and morals into a much larger, some segment of society, and therefore help society in its own way. Thanks.
No, thank you, Mr. Raman. I think streamlining, the disadvantage is a great initiative, and you're actually marrying it with your organization's capabilities to scale it up. That's very inspiring. Mr. Singhi, yes. Your perspectives.
Yes, I've been always trying to, walk the talk and talk the walk. So, since 2008, I have been driving first the small Reva car, electric car. I never used to drive, but then it was so easy to drive. As well, I could also show that it is a great payback. How? Just for a minute, I'll say that it costed at that time 3.5 lakh rupees. And at that time, the cost, the salary of my driver was 3.5 lakh. So the moment I took that car, I posted my driver to mines to run the other equipment. So that was one, and that became the talk of the town, and then it impacted in a big way. Second, I would say, created a philosophy of be happy and make others happy. And in the organization, it created a good value. And I always say happy morning, happy afternoon, and happy evening, and happy night, and happy day. Third, I would say have the philosophy of just transition. In whatever I do personally, am I ensuring that it's a just transition if I am changing anything in my home or otherwise? And the same philosophy we are adopting now in our organization also, that if we are shifting from, say, thermal energy to renewable energy, how I'm taking care of the people who are working in thermal energy plant. Fourthly, I would say I I thought that let me be the climate leader. And good part is that, because I wanted to enjoy the enjoy the thought that I have done something for the future generation. So one, I got engaged with the school children in a big way, and now pursuing in a big way. Second, I became, COP26 business leader, where I could engage with many leaders, including Joe Biden, John Kerry, Modi ji, and everyone in COP26. And then I could also become, carbon pricing leader also of World Bank Group. So this is all helping me personally. Of course, it needs a lot of personal efforts, extra time also. But then this is how we can talk the walk. This is just
Good, thank you.
Always.
Thank you so much. I wish we had more time and we are top of the hour. Such an inspiring session, such engaging perspectives. Thank you, Mr. Singhi, Gurmeet, Shukla, Raman, for your sharing your perspectives, and Ms. Bhattacharya in her absence because she had to leave early. Back to you, Richa.
And I would say that I really learned a lot from this all interactions, and maybe I'll take liberty of approaching each and everyone to learn more. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
So much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Mr. Prabhakar, and I would like to warmly thank all the esteemed panelists. What an insightful and wonderful discussion it was. Listening to it on the sidelines was really an eye-opener. Some very important takeaways in terms of the actionable points. Thank you once again for sharing your knowledge. With this, I thank all the esteemed speakers, honorable guests, and all the participants who've been with us through the session for making day one of this national convention a great success. Stay tuned with us tomorrow as there's lots coming up on day two of this convention. We look forward to having you all back with us tomorrow. Please join us at 10:15 a.m. for the first deep dive session. Till then, thank you and take care.